I want it to be a story that hopefully people are moved by it sufficiently that the story becomes their story and not my story.
Willis kommt aufgrund seiner fortschreitenden Demenz auf seiner Farm im Mittleren Westen nicht mehr allein klar. Sein Sohn John holt ihn deshalb zu sich nach Los Angeles. Dort treibt Willis mit seinen homophoben und rassistischen Ausbrüchen John und dessen Ehemann Eric an die Grenze der Belastbarkeit. Nach und nach offenbart sich, wie sehr der weltoffene und tolerante John sein Leben lang unter der Aggressivität und Engstirnigkeit seines erzkonservativen Vaters gelitten hat.
Du weißt, wo die Tür ist, mein Freund.
Du bist so ein Arschloch.
Und du eine verfluchte Schwuchtel.
Im Himmel wollen sie ihn nicht und der Teufel schickt ihn immer wieder zurück.
Viggo Mortensen spielt in forFalling nicht nur die Hauptrolle, sondern liefert mit dem einfühlsamen Vater-Sohn-Drama auch sein Drehbuch- und Regiedebüt ab. In Berlin haben wir ihn zum Interview getroffen.
How did you get the idea for this movie?
When my mother died, I'd been thinking already a lot about her and my father, and because they were both getting quite a bit older, and she had problems with dementia and forgetting things, and so I was thinking of the importance of trying to write down everything I could remember that I had heard about her and from other people that knew her and so forth, including the things I heard at her funeral. So it started with this, making some notes, and then I saw these things, you know, quotes and stories from different time periods, and I thought, well, this is an interesting structure. It could be an interesting story to make, even an interesting movie. So that's how it began.
Mm-hmm. And how would you describe the relationship between Willis and John? What kind of father-son relationship is it?
Complicated. Most of them, I think, are, if not all of them, on some level. Even the relationships that are very positive, there are always secrets, there are always misunderstandings, and I think because perception, individual perception in the present, is always very subjective. And I think most people tend to think, well, the present is confusing, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but the past, these are facts, I know what happened. And not so much. I have found in my own life experience and with my parents that every person has a slightly different details that they remember. You know, everybody edits their past without even thinking about it. My brothers or my parents have different ways of remembering things that happen, and so I put this in the story in a way because it's really the differences of opinion and of feelings that, say, the father and son have about the mother figure, the wife of Willis and the mother of John, when, even though she's not the main character that you see on screen all the time, for me she is the principal character morally. She's always there, flying above or behind what they're arguing about in some way, you know, the vision of her that they have. I think that we try to control our past so that we can be comfortable in the present and safe. We don't even think about it, but we edit. We always, you know, and so I think the past is much less fixed and factual than we really think it is. But it's still interesting to explore this because the past determines how we behave, how we see other people, and what we do in life, you know.
Mm-hmm. And would you say that the conservative Willis and the progressive John and the conflict between them stands symbolically for the separation in our society, especially in the USA?
Yeah, even when I was writing it, it wasn't as bad as it has become in the last 4 years. In the United States, mainly, I mean, this problem was always there. And I think this is, we talk about the pandemic of COVID-19, but there is a pandemic that's as old as humankind, and it ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's a lot of contagion, and it's dangerous, and other times it's just there. But the possibility of disagreement and polarization is a human thing because it stems from something that each new generation has to fight against. The vocabulary and the targets of fear and mistrust of people who are different or think differently is very human, and each generation has to find a way to learn to not do this consciously. But there's an older pandemic which is now just as serious, which is this polarization. Right now, not just in the United States, but in Germany and most other countries, There's a lot of this, and the fire is made bigger by opportunist politicians, not just on the right, but on all sides, who like to fan the flames because it serves them for getting power, for keeping power, for distracting from facts. You know, you have politicians that have a double function. They are the pyromaniacs and they are the firemen who say, out of the way, I'm the only one that can put out this fire. And who made this fire? When they know it was them. You know what I mean? These kinds of things, it's happening. And so even when I was writing it, even though it was not as contagious as it is right now, this pandemic of polarization, I was still aware that somebody could look at this story, if I make it well enough and people are interested in the story of this family, they could see it as a mirror of society, and not just in the United States. Yeah, I think you can look at it this way.
And how difficult was it for you to direct for the first time and also play one of the main characters?
Well, just directing is something that I'd been wanting to do for a long time. The first time I tried to make a movie from a script I wrote was maybe 24 years ago or something. I've always been interested, ever since I became an actor, started to work in movie business, and probably before, as a spectator, I've always been interested in how a story goes from the page to the screen. This collective effort, how does it work? It's part of the reason I got into it, because of the storytelling, the team storytelling aspect. And the more I've worked in the business, the more I understand the importance of not just the actors, but of the cinematography and the editing, the costumes, the choice of color, of light and camera positions and music, all these things, you know, and I've always been fascinated. So it wasn't surprising to me, or I was like, oh, I don't know how this works. I already had a good idea of how to do it. As far as acting in it, my original intention was to not act in it so that I could give my full attention to the crew and the cast, but it became useful to try to get the money, because I tried a couple of times and failed to get the money to make Falling. And when I agreed to be in it, then it wasn't easy, but it was a little bit easier. I wanted to have 7 or 6 weeks to shoot. It's a very complicated story with different time periods, children who have limited hours to work, shooting in winter, limited sunlight hours. In the end, we only got 5 weeks, which is very little. So we had to be very organized. But I've been fortunate. I've worked for some very intelligent directors over the years, and I've seen how much importance the best ones give to preparing very early and very thoroughly, you know. So, and also talking and being open to the crew and the cast, their ideas, their questions, not to see this as a threat to your authority, but that it can be helpful. This is all this idea of collective storytelling, you know.
And would you say this movie was some kind of catharsis for you?
Maybe, in a way. I mean, I thought a lot more about my family and my parents. I mean, this was what I wanted to explore, I guess, what I feel for them and what I've learned from them. One of the reasons it became an emotional journey for me was because the cast and the crew also related personally to it. And every day they would share stories about their own family. I didn't even ask them. They said, oh, this reminds me of my grandparents or my uncle or my mother or something. And I thought, that's great. It made me feel like, okay, my story is very specific and in a way personal, but other people understand it for themselves. And I've felt this with audiences when I've been showing the movie on my trip through Europe by car, presenting in Spain and France and Belgium, Holland, now Germany, that people relate to it, and that feels good. I want it to be a story that hopefully people are moved by it sufficiently that the story becomes their story and not my story.
Ihr wollt mich abzocken, weil ihr denkt, ich hätte meinen Verstand nicht mehr beisammen. Aber da täuscht ihr euch! Scheiß drauf. Ich sag dir jetzt mal was. Wenn ein Typ in meinem Alter denkt, er müsste pissen, dann hat er das bereits getan.
Dad, hör auf!
Was?